bring you a special report.
Welcome to episode 102 of Not a Robot Podcast's DC Comics review show. Today is going to be a bit of a different episode. Our two other amazing co-hosts were unable to read the DC books for some other reasons that I won't get into, but because of that, it's just going to be me going solo this week. So hopefully that doesn't go terribly. I'm going to have to just kind of sit here and talk to myself for the next hour and see how that goes. But yeah, this week we will be covering Batman 125, Poison Ivy number 2, Flashpoint Beyond number 3, and Dark Crisis number 2, with a couple of honorable mentions and a few spotlights thrown in there before we get into our main reviews. Of course, make sure you stick around until the end of each episode to hear our top 3 books of the week, the biggest stinker, and to find out which titles might just make the dump list. If you'd like to support us further, please visit buymeacoffee.com/NAR podcast for either a one-time donation or subscription for access to our Discord, as well as other exclusive content available on the network. But with that out of the way, I guess I'll talk about some news for this week. Really not a ton on my end. There are a couple of new interesting books coming out that I think are worth mentioning. One is from Vault called Heart Eyes from Dennis Hopeless and Victor Ibanez. Don't know too much about Dennis Hopeless. I know a couple of books that he's done, but nothing that really was a major mark in my comics reading journey. But I know Victor Ibanez, he did work with Dennis Hopeless on Jean Grey back in 2017. But more recently, something that I read was a book called Ratcatcher from Andy Diggle and Victor Ibanez. And he did really stellar art on that, all done in black and white, with a couple of gray tones applied, if I remember correctly. But yeah, this is supposed to be a very simple kind of chaos story, post-chaos story, where instead of it being some kind of nuclear apocalypse or some kind of man-made apocalypse, it's just good old-fashioned monsters is how it's described. Monsters invading the Earth and how society reacts. And our story focuses on a young woman by the name of Lupe, who for some reason is very happy and always smiling in this horrible monster-filled land. And it's about her journey falling in love with a young boy named Rico, who saves her life, and we'll see what happens from there. But the first issue is out August 17th, 2022, from Vault, and you can pre-order that now. They have a preview available for anyone who's interested on Adventures in Poor Taste. So yeah, I would definitely say it's worth your time to check it out when it comes out. But maybe let's not focus on books that are soon to come, but books that are already out, starting with one from someone we certainly are no stranger to here on the network, and that is Mr. James Tynion. I wanted to recommend The Closet number 2. That's a book that I really enjoyed. Really like the first issue. It was definitely very personal, very family-driven. Kind of felt like a Jeff Lemire book almost, but filtered through James Tynion's voice, which I really appreciated. And number 2 is certainly keeping that atmosphere going. There's definitely a horror element to it, but that I would say is more subtle. It really isn't until the end of both the first and second chapter that you see the more outright horrific elements. But the themes of horror and distress and pain and all that stuff are kind of more subtle throughout the book in the family drama and stuff like that. So definitely recommend checking it out. That is from James Tynion and Mr. Gavin Fullerton, with colors from Chris O'Halloran, which is a great way to connect to another recommendation I have, a book from a friend of the show, Mr. Ed Brisson, that we talked about while we were interviewing him. There's Something Wrong with Patrick Todd, number 1, which is finally out today. That features art from Gavin Guidry with colors from Mr. Chris O'Halloran and is, of course, written by Ed Brisson. I read that one actually shortly before recording and Really, really enjoyed that one. Strong start, and I think it's definitely going to be in line with some of the stuff that Ed has done before, the very character-driven, down-to-earth stories. You know, these are people who are often down on their luck or something like that, but with a supernatural element that will keep your interests going if you're looking for something more there. And definitely has a mystery towards the end that I really want to see how that all plays out. So I'm hoping that this series can really be something special. Beyond the Breach was a really great book from Ed Brisson over at Aftershock, and I hope they find a way to bring that one back. But if this is a new Aftershock book that Ed is doing, I really can't complain if he's delivering stuff of this quality. So. There's something wrong with Patrick Todd. I mean, with a title like that, it'd be hard to forget it. But also definitely worth your time. Um, yeah, I don't believe I have anything else really in terms of comics news. There was one minor thing that I wanted to bring up that came out last week, or I think maybe 2 weeks ago, and that was pretty exciting news over at our Marvelous competition. And that was the announcement that they would finally be releasing Neil Gaiman and Mark Buckingham's sequel to their first story on Miracle Man, The Golden Age, where this sequel will be called The Silver Age. And it's just sort of crazy that it's actually coming out after all this time. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. I thought it was one of those projects that was just sort of never really going to come to fruition. They talked about having a certain number of issues done, but I figured it was all tied up with rights and ownership and that nonsense. So I knew Marvel had the Miracle Man license and then I think lost it or something like that. But I never really thought they would actually, allow uh, Gaiman and Buckingham to finish their story. So it's really exciting that we get this, and I'm definitely eager to see how they continue their Miracle Man story. I'm hoping that if we can get Miracle Man to come back, we can get Alan Moore and Bill Sienkiewicz's Big Numbers to come back. That's another great unfinished epic that I hope one day comes to fruition. Um, one more minor note, there is a new animated film coming based on the Super Sons called Batman and Superman Battle of the Super Sons. Just nearly forgot about that, but I saw it in my feed, so I figured it was worth mentioning. Um, and that is, yeah, that is, exactly as it sounds. It's going to be starring the Super Sons for the first time in animation. Some kind of new story involving the Super Sun. So I don't think people are going to be too upset about that. And I'm certainly looking forward to it. I almost hope that they could get Pete Tomasi to be like a consulting writer or executive producer or something like that. Because Pete Tomasi did a wonderful job on Super Sons when he was writing that title. A little disappointed they didn't lean more into the Jorge Jimenez style. It looks like they're opting for more of like a 3D style, but looks like it'll be really fun and cute and something that you can definitely watch with your kids. One final one that I wanted to mention, and this is more related to me, but for any comics fans who were online in like the early 2010s to like 2015, this might be relevant to you. But over on the Word Balloon podcast with John Suntress, they had a little celebration yesterday of the 30th, or sorry, not the 30th, but the 10th anniversary of Monkey Brain Comics, which was one of the very early digital imprints, right when Comixology was getting big and a lot of people were trying out some of the new digital stuff. And Mark Waid had Thrillbent, and a couple of other people were doing some stuff online. And Monkey Brain with Chris Roberson, who you might know from iZombie, and these days he's doing a lot of the Mignolaverse stuff. And his wife Allison Baker founded Monkey Brain, and brought in a bunch of creators to just do these digital series that you could read. And I had read Edison Rex. I hadn't really read any of the other ones, but I liked Edison Rex just because it's a great title. And it was really cool. It's nice to see that even after 10 years, they're still kind of they're still kind of doing their thing. I mean, I don't think they're actively publishing anymore. The imprint still exists, but all the rights have reverted to the creators. With the exception of the Edison Rex stuff, because I think that's just co-owned by Roberson and Dennis Culver. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting. It unfortunately got cut short for some reasons, but I was excited because yeah, I was as a fan of Edison Rex and that era of like digital comics, it was nice to kind of look back to a time where things were a lot more simple. Now there's so many different types of digital books that you can read on Webtoons and Tapas and all these other great resources. But back then a lot of the stuff was just like comics creators who had only worked in print trying to figure out how to serialize their stuff on the internet, and it was really cool and fresh and new. And books like Edison Rex, while not groundbreaking, were definitely very exciting at the time. So that's over on the Word Balloon podcast. You can check that out, and it's just a good way for anyone who even remembers the Monkey Brain stuff to kind of reflect back on a time past. But yeah, with all that said, I mean, I don't think I have anything else to mention. I want to get a few honorable mentions out of the way, some of which I've read, some of which I haven't. Monkey Prince #6 is out this week. I have not been following this series, but I know Josh has, and he's been speaking very highly of it. So if you're a fan, I would definitely encourage you to check it out. It looks great. At some point, I'm just going to have to catch up with it all. But I just have been reading so many other things that I just have not had the time yet. But Monkey Prince #6, that's out now. The Joker #15, which is both the finale to this big, long 15-part saga, as well as the end of the series, actually, I believe. Yes, yeah, the final issue of the series. I debated putting this in the main review section, but in all honesty, I didn't really have a ton of thoughts about this one. So maybe if we get a chance to do, a proper review with all three of us, we'll get a chance to debrief about Joker. But honestly, I didn't have a ton of thoughts about this one, and for a book that was really riding high for a while, it wasn't the best ending in my opinion, but I'll just leave it at that. And DC Vampires #7, DC versus Vampires #7 came out this week. It's the return of the main series. That's of course Matthew Rosenberg and James Tynion with Otto Schmidt, who is amazing. And that's a lot of fun. Glad to have that back. It's certainly interesting to look at the world post Rise of the Vampires. It's definitely keeping its comedy going. I haven't really been keeping up with a ton of the tie-ins that they've been releasing for DC versus Vampires, so I'm glad to just have the main series back that I can follow and enjoy. So that's very exciting. But yeah, with all that said, let's get into some of the main books for this week. Or so actually, let's get into some of our spotlights for this week before we get into our main reviews. And first, I'm going to shine a spotlight over on Nubia, Queen of the Amazons. This is, of course, written by Stephanie Williams with art from Letha Martinez and the rest of the team I'm pulling up because I should have written it down, but I did not. Inks from Mark Morales and John Livesay with colors from Alex Guimares. I hope I pronounced that right. And letters from Becca Carey. This is, kind of checking in on Nubia following the end of the first issue. She has some more interactions with some of the other Amazons in this issue, as well as teaming up with Hawk Girl and Yara Floor, and just really kind of continues the story. I didn't get a chance to do quite as deep a read on this one as I might have liked, but definitely we'll have to go back and circle back to this one and maybe give it a proper read through at some point. But yeah, I mean, it was okay from what I remember. I mean, I don't really think I'm doing it justice all that well. But for what was sort of an unimpressive first issue, I don't know that this really changed my mind in any significant way. It just sort of continued the same emotions that I've been feeling since the last issue, which was very meh. For a book that really had a lot riding on it, especially following the trial of the Amazons. I really expected a lot more, and I'm just kind of waiting for something. I don't know, some kind of major point to happen in this story that I can really latch onto. Otherwise, I'm just not really feeling it at the moment. And maybe that's just sort of the case following Trial of the Amazons. I mean, that was a massive story and certainly involved a lot of moving parts. But I don't know. I guess I feel like I'm waiting for, like I said, something major to happen, and I feel like this is just kind of retreading things that we've already seen in previous issues of Nubia and the Amazons. So yeah, I really didn't have a ton to say about this one. The art is fine from Aletha Martinez and the rest of the team, but really the standout is the cover from Kari Randolph, who's always amazing, really knocks it out of the park. And there's a variant cover from Torrin Clark, who's absolutely incredible. And if you want to see him just blow your mind, he does a lot of process posts over on Instagram where he breaks down his art process, and it's absolutely mind blowing. So I would recommend the covers, but I don't know how much I'd recommend the series. So I gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. Not really a ton to say. uh, Next up, we have Batman Beyond Neo Year #4. This is brought to us by the really, again, I have to say, kind of stellar breakout team of late, Mr. Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly, who have been doing amazing work here and there. I can't sing the praises of a Harbinger enough. That was a book that I really, really enjoyed right up until the end, and including the end. But I was quite sad to see it go after 8 issues. And of course, art from Max Dunbar with colors from Romulo Fajardo Jr. and letters from Aditya Bidikar. Um, Terry is fighting the Sword of Gotham throughout the city. That's sort of the bulk of this issue. Again, Terry is still um, fighting against the sentient city, the sentient Gotham, and this time he sort of has his next round with the actual Sword of Gotham, and they're trading blows and all that sort of stuff, and it's really putting Terry at his limits and challenging him in a way that probably has not happened in quite a while, especially considering that he doesn't have Bruce to fall back on. And of course, we're also checking in with Barbara Gordon and everything that's going on with her as she's retiring. So yeah, I mean, it still is kind of keeping the action going. It's probably just my Batman Beyond bias showing, but I've definitely been satisfied with the story so far, and I'm hoping that maybe there is a sequel in the works to this or an ongoing. I would hope that with such a really sharp team and story like this, they wouldn't just kind of end it after 6, but maybe they just want to have a really solid story and call it quits. But I hope that's not the case. I really do, because I would love to see more from this team, more from this era of Batman Beyond, and just to see more of what they could do. So yeah, I gave this one an 8 out of 10. Really satisfied. Max Dunbar certainly delivers in the art realm of this, and really gives some solid work throughout the book. Some really kinetic panels between the fight of the Sword of Gotham and Terry, and just really, really sharp stuff, and the colors in particular from Romulo Fajardo Jr. As always are really stellar. So definitely check this one out if you can, if you enjoy Batman Beyond, or you're just looking for a really interesting, cyberpunk-esque story set in the DCU. So yeah, the final one that I want to give a spotlight to, that I probably should put on the honorable mentions, but I just uh, you know uh, decided to give it a little bit more time, and I wanted to shout out the creative team. Um, is Multiversity Teen Justice #2. I actually also did not get a chance to read this one. Believe it or not, my store didn't have any copies of this one left. And as much as I would love to read it online, I've really been enjoying this one in print. So I'm honestly just going to wait until they restock and I get my stuff in order. Um, but no, I want to shout out the team. This is, of course, written by Yvonne Cohen with Danny Lore, with art from Marco Failla, and colors from Enrica Angelini, and a really gorgeous cover from Robbie Rodriguez that at some points I can't even tell that it's Robbie Rodriguez. It's just really well done. Not that his other stuff isn't well done, but this one was just kind of in a very different style, at least from some of the stuff that I'd seen that I didn't even recognize it upon first glance. So yeah, really, really, I hope will be a really solid read. The first issue was fun, very cute. Just seeing the different versions of characters. And while there wasn't the most robust story, it was just kind of nice checking in with our friends on Earth 13, or Earth 11, excuse me. Um, and just seeing what they're up to and that sort of thing. So it's not the greatest story in the world, at least according to the first issue, but it is a lot of fun just to kind of see these alternate versions and not take itself too seriously, which I appreciate. So I'm looking forward to checking this one out when I get the chance, but I have not gotten to read it yet. But that about does it for our honorable mention section. So before we get into our main reviews, we are going to take I'm going to take a brief commercial break. There's really no we here. I'm going to take a brief commercial break, and then I will be right back to finish the rest of the books for this week. And I am back. Thank you very much for sticking with Not a Robot on this rather unconventional episode. To kick it off, we are going to be looking at the second biggest event of the DCU canon right now, and making our return to a rather twisted realm with Flashpoint Beyond, #3. This is, of course, written by Mr. Jeff Johns with Jeremy Adams and Tim Sheridan providing some additional work as well. Art from Zermanico with a couple pages towards the end by Mikel Hanin, colors from Romulo Fajardo and Jordi Belair coloring those Mikel Hanin pages, letters from Rob Lee, and yet another gorgeous cover from Mitch Gerrits, which, again, I think that this book is in some ways kind of an apology for Infinite Frontier, and not necessarily the quality of the book itself, just the artistic inconsistencies of that book, since there were so many different artists involved. And originally it was announced to just be Josh Williamson and Zermanico, but it had a number of fill-in artists, Paul Pelletier and Tom Derenick, just to name a few. Whereas this is, I mean, the same artistic team as Infinite Frontier, but just reapplied somewhere else. So a part of me almost thinks this is them saying, well, we're sorry that we couldn't have a more consistent team on Infinite Frontier. Here's another book with that same team, same cover artist, same penciler, same colorist, as had originally been intended for Infinite Frontier. But now we're going to make sure that it stays consistent, because all 3 issues thus far have been illustrated by Zermanico. And boy, he is doing an amazing job so far. But our story starts on the planet Krypton, a story that you may or may not have heard before, where a rocket is jettisoned from the exploding planet of Krypton and makes its way towards Earth, although something is a little different about this one, because this time Kal-El is jettisoned alongside quite a few other rockets who we will come to learn about later. But we see that this rocket in particular, the one that we're following, that has a message being spread throughout it, or throughout the opening part of the story, is making its way to Earth, and first arrives in Smallville, Kansas. I'm sure you've heard this story, but wait, there's a twist, and you can insert that Robot Chicken clip there. This rocket flies right past Smallville, Kansas, and does not land in the cornfield, and instead makes its way towards Metropolis, where, because of its speed and size, the impact that it makes is that unto a missile and completely eradicates the city, killing millions. The entire population of Metropolis, according to this, was decimated, or according to a report, was decimated. We check in with Dexter Dent and Mr. Oswald Cobblepot, who are working on lockpicking, and Ozzy's showing Dexter how to pick a lock. Um, while they're in the middle of their training session, the Reverse Flash shows up and is spouting some kind of crazy nonsense that they're not really able to understand in any way before disappearing almost immediately, which we will get more on later. But they kind of brush it off as some nonsense, and Ozzy in particular has no idea what's going on, but he decides that he needs a drink, and he's going to make sure that the kid gets one too, or at least asks if the kid gets one. He's a minor, Ozzy. Don't give him anything too strong. Um, when last we checked in with Dr. Batman, he had met the Kryptonian Kal-El, the S1 experiment, our strange demented version, or the Flashpoint strange demented version of Superman. So Superman, or S1, or the Super Dash Man, is giving Thomas a very clear ultimatum that he needs to come with him, and that he has something that he needs to tell him, something that is important. Um, they're still in the alley at this point, the alley where Dr. Batman had taken out the decidedly not rogues, but still very villainous rogues. And the one who is very obviously Captain Boomerang tries to get a couple of shots off at Kal-El, which does not work at all. And Kal-El gives him the most horrifying face you've ever seen and tells him that if he does not make his way out of there, he will die. Turns his attention back to Dr. Batman and informs him that he really needs him to come with him to tell him about something that's important. And, Thomas does all but flip him off and tells him that he's really not coming with him, that he has nothing to say to him, and that there's nothing that he can do or make him do without, him getting out of it, which Kal-El promptly shows him that that is not even remotely the case by knocking him out and taking him to the sanctuary where Poison Ivy and the rest of the Forgotten are staying. But before we check in with Poison Ivy, we get a brief little check-in with Gilda Dent, who in the last issue had cut her face almost perfectly in half on the glass and is now having mysterious voices speak into her head, and is telling her things about what she should do, or what she should get, particularly in reference to Dexter, and I'm sure that will play out soon. I don't know who that voice is necessarily. I originally thought it might have been her psyche, maybe her two-faced psyche manifesting itself, or possibly a psyche that resembles Harvey that's manifesting itself, although that would be a little bit too derivative of Batman Earth 1. But in any case, we'll see what happens there. In the sanctuary, called the Oasis properly, um, Dr. Batman meets with Poison Ivy and the others, and gets a sense of the land before Kal-El informs him of what he really wants out of Dr. Batman, something that is coming and coming soon. And he grabs one of the Kryptonian crystals that had crashed alongside his rocket, and connects it to Swamp Thing. And when it does, he gets the spooky Jor-El hologram, except this time it's not a hologram. It's made out of vines and plants, but presumably still speaking with the voice of Jor-El. And this version of Jor-El informs him that Kal-El was only one of several rockets that were sent to multiple different planets, not to act as benefactors, but to act as conquerors for the coming Kryptonians.
After these messages, we'll be right back. Now, back to our program.
And so this race of Kryptonians, as you can tell, is quite a bit more sinister than the ones that we've seen previously, which is fitting for this version of the DC universe. But Cal really has brought Dr. Batman here to try and get his assistance, to fight against the Kryptonians, and in particular, Poison Ivy alerts them that they really need to try and build some kind of resistance, like they had done previously to take on Aquaman and Wonder Woman, their, I guess, bizarro version of the Justice League, if you will, to try and find some way to stop the Kryptonians when they make their way to Earth, which Swamp Thing, this version of Swamp Thing, as Jason Woodrue informs them, will be in 5 days. Thomas Wayne, once again, essentially flips them off and says, screw that, I have my mission, I just have to solve it in a smaller amount of time than I had thought, but it doesn't matter because I'm not going to help you with your Kryptonian nonsense, and I'm going to get my proper reality back. Get the proper reality back. We check in with the commissioner over in Gotham City, who is checking on a body that had recently appeared at the office of one Iris West, who was terrified when the body just appeared, was there, and decided to run home. And when she came back, that body was totally dead. I guess that this body was still kind of clinging on to life as it arrived, but by the time she got back with her husband, it was completely dead, or he was completely dead. And that person is none other than Mr. Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash. This guy's died so many times at this point. You should probably just make bets on how quickly he'll come back. It's insane. But he's arranged in such a fashion that looks almost like a clock, a mystery, I'm sure, as to who the Clockwork Killer might be. Before we get to the end, we check in with our favorite time hunters who are traveling through hypertime right now, which is extremely volatile given everything that's happening with the Great Darkness, and this newly reformed Flashpoint reality, and Bonnie, the sister of Corky Baxter. Bonnie Baxter is trying to make sure that they stay safe, away from all the craziness with the Great Darkness and potential revisions and all that stuff. And the best thing to do might be to just ride the storm of hypertime until all the Great Darkness stuff blows over, just to make sure that their history is not revised as well. But things are really only getting worse in hypertime because it's totally chaotic and crazy right now. So yeah, that was Flashpoint Beyond #3. Definitely a lot going on in this issue. Very packed with material. I'm still really enjoying it, and I liked the many references to DC events, or to DC characters that now have a sort of weird twist on them. I guess that was kind of the fun of the original Flashpoint universe, was seeing these strange, bizarro versions of characters. As Poison Ivy's mentioning some of the heroes that they want to elicit to help them. Some of the ones that are mentioned are a boy in Happy Harbor, Rhode Island, who has a special dial that gives him superpowers, named Snapper Carr. A scientist in Solar City, Florida, known as Eclipsa. And then, of course, some of the regulars that we've seen before: Cyborg, Element Woman, Starman. And it's strange because I guess Element Woman now exists both in the Flashpoint universe and in the main universe. It's just we haven't seen Element Woman in quite some time. But I remember she was one of those strange alterations in the Flashpoint universe that existed throughout the new reformed New 52 reality, and probably still exists in the main DC universe today. Just like I said, we haven't checked in with her in a while, so it's hard to say whether or not she's still around. But if that is the case, then yeah, we have two Element Womans. But no, it's cool seeing all the fun Easter eggs, both to regular DC continuity, or references to DC continuity, and of course previous Flashpoint continuity. And it was interesting seeing this kind of twist on the Superman mythos, where the Kryptonians are not just this, incredibly generous race, or at least the Kents are very, not the Kents, but the Elves are very generous people, and they're, trying to send their son to a world to grow up normal and to be a savior, but instead to be a conqueror, which again I do feel is fitting with the Flashpoint universe. And it'll be interesting to see how that Kryptonian invasion plays out. Now, I do worry that this story has a lot to juggle, because it's both trying to continue the mystery of the Clockwork Killer, while Thomas Wayne is also trying to figure out how this new reality, this new Flashpoint reality came to be, while also tying in with the Dexter Dent stuff and the Gilda Dent stuff, and the Time Master stuff. And of course, now we have the Kryptonian invasion angle. And there were a lot of moving parts in Flashpoint, the original Flashpoint, don't get me wrong. But the focus was really put on Barry Allen. And the focus is clearly on Thomas here. But introducing all these different elements can make things a little muddled. And I'm worried about how it's going to tie everything together, especially given that this is a 6-issue miniseries, and we're already on issue 3. So we're halfway through. I just really hope that they're able to tie everything into a neat little bow, or at the very least, try and tie everything up in a way that makes sense. It was also kind of surprising to see how much this tied into some of the stuff that's going on in the DC universe right now, and I guess we'll get into that later. But with Dark Crisis and everything else that's going on, they were pretty explicit about the references, especially towards the end with the Time Masters, and how all of this stuff is happening. Like it's going on. The Great Darkness is making its way towards Earth Prime or New Earth, while they're dealing with everything in Hypertime in the Flashpoint universe. So I guess these two things, Dark Crisis and Flashpoint Beyond, are happening concurrently, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Although, as we previously established, we don't really know what the timeline is on this, so maybe they're not happening concurrently. We saw Barry Allen in the first issue or second issue, if I remember correctly, and obviously that can't really line up with the Dark Crisis timeline because Barry is still trapped on Earth Flashpoint 1. So not really sure how that makes sense, but I'm sure they'll be able to figure it out in some way. But I'm not really worried so much. I'm just sort of enjoying the ride right now. And of course, the art from Zermanico is out of this world. So many gorgeous panels. One in particular that just kind of focuses on Thomas after he basically tells Poison Ivy and Kal-El to F off. That is just so well illustrated, so well colored that it was really a sight to behold. And I was very, very impressed with the art in this one. Zermanico just doing amazing stuff. So I gave this one an 8.25 out of 10. I'm enjoying the ride so far, and although I'm cautious about the number of plot lines that this story is juggling, I hope that it can stick the landing and give me something really satisfying. So that's very cool. Moving right on to our next title, and I debated moving this one towards the end because it is, as the title on the cover promises, a very new and exciting era beginning in this one. But why not just talk about it now? So we're going to go from Gotham City to Gotham City, except this was a different Gotham City, one that is much more familiar to us and is not quite as twisted, though still twisted in many ways, as we'll soon find out. This is Batman 125, brought to us by the very exciting new creative team of, yes, Mr. Chip Zdarsky, Mr. Daredevil, Howard the Duck, sex criminals himself. That's his full title, by the way. It's over on Substack if you don't believe me. Yeah, Mr. Chip Zdarsky making his I would say even bigger DC debut, even more so than Urban Legends and the Batman Red Hood story that he did about a year ago, because this is the main flagship title, baby. This is the big time. So everyone's very excited and anxious, and ready to see what Mr. Zdarsky is going to bring to this book. So I'm not even going to blab about the context anymore. Let's just hop right into it, and get into it. But yes, of course, this is written by Chip Zdarsky, with respect to the rest of the creative team. Also, some giants returning, Mr. Jorge Jimenez, who is the most evil man in the world, because he is both incredibly handsome and an incredibly talented penciler, and inker and colorist and all of these things. And it's not fair, because no one should be that talented and that conventionally attractive. You can't have everything. So I hate him. He's evil. But damn if he doesn't make stuff look good. And it makes me so incredibly jealous. Got to shout out the rest of the team. Colors from Tomu Murray, who's been coloring this book for like 3 years at this point. God bless you, Tomu. You're doing great stuff on Noctera. I hope you're coming back, buddy. We love you here, and we're very happy to see that you're continuing with this book with letters from Clayton Cowles, who is also a Titan in his own right, and probably one of the best letters in the biz right now. Eisner nominated for Jimmy Olsen. So if that doesn't show you his prowess, I don't know what does. We also have a couple of variant covers that I have to shout out. A gorgeous one from In-hyuk Lee, and a very exciting one from Jim Lee and Scott Williams and Alex Sinclair. You know your book is special when you get a Jim Lee variant cover, so I think that means that this is off to a great start. But let's actually get into the story itself. We flash back to another time, a distant time in the past, where we're looking back on a simpler time where Alfred is in the Batcave cleaning up after Master Bruce and his energy drinks when he hears a mysterious beeping in the background. And he's sort of caught off guard by it, but he doesn't know what it is. But we cut away from there to a really strange scene of three different Jokers. Trust me, it's not that kind of story. But three different Jokers who seem to be haunting Bruce in a nightmare as he wakes up rather suddenly with the very dramatic opening monologue that I love. I never dream unless I want to. Only Batman could say something like that. Only he could control his dreams, as he further elucidates and says that he only uses it when he wants to activate his subconscious to try and solve a mystery while he's sleeping, because God forbid Bruce should get some peaceful sleep. No, he's got to be working even when he's sleeping. That's how dedicated the mission is. But Bruce, feeling very unsettled by that Joker dream, and I can imagine anyone would feel unsettled by a dream like that, decides to call someone very close to him, Selena, to kind of check in. And she is, doing her thing, and they have a little bit of back and forth. But unfortunately, Selena has to hang up early, presumably to continue having sex with Valmont, who is living with her at the time. And if you're reading Catwoman, you know what that's all about. Bruce seems to be almost a little put off by this, based on that facial expression, and it kind of elaborates that maybe it's time to move on from the past, and that includes past relationship and past emotions. Focus not on the future and not on the mystery to come, but on the present and what's going on in Gotham right now. And what is going on in Gotham right now? Well, Selena mentioned it during their conversation, but someone is targeting the rich and killing them. And Bruce is on the mystery, is on the case, trying to figure out what's going on. And we cut to a high rise at Gotham City where the police are on a standoff right now, sort of waiting for the sniper who's at the window, or waiting for the shooter who's at the window to make his move, because they're not really sure what to do next. They have snipers in position. There's no sniper at the window, and are trying to figure out what to do next before it escalates any further. But as one of the police officers rather slyly mentions, I don't think it's going to get any worse, because Batman arrives on the scene in a very dramatic fashion, proclaiming to the scared perp who's inside that it's not God who's here, it's someone far, far worse. Or at least that's the implication. So you get an awesome fight scene where Batman takes down this perp, makes his way downstairs, and finds that the two people who were in the apartment have already been killed. A rather dark and grim opening, I have to say, like just cutting to the deceased bodies without any kind of pleas for help or anything. They're already dead and they're just sort of lying there. It's a very, very grim choice on Mr. Zdarsky's behalf, and illustrated rather gruesomely by Jorge. But Batman, feeling incredibly upset about this, pulls the perp back through the window and wants nothing more to do with him, isn't going to punish him in any particularly worse way. He just wants one simple answer, and that is, who sent this guy? We cut in a very dramatic fashion to the person who could only send this guy, and that is Mr. Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin, but a very different version than we've seen in Flashpoint Beyond. This is a Cobblepot who is a lot more ruthless and, dare I say, egalitarian, because he has declared a ultimatum on the people, particularly the wealthy people of Gotham City, stating that anyone who's ever inherited more than $5 million will give that money back to the people of Gotham or they will die. If their family inherits the money after they die and they don't donate it, they will also die. It's about creating a better Gotham, I guess, but only through force. Um, why is Penguin doing this? Well, as Bruce mentions, it's rather silly considering that Penguin himself was born into considerable wealth. The Cobblepots, as we've established in previous Batman comics, were a very wealthy Gotham family and certainly were not living poorly. But Cobblepot seems to be doing this for more personal reasons, given that he has always felt neglected and shunned by Gotham's elite and is finally trying to get his justice. Bruce is watching this live stream that Cobblepot is issuing before the arrival of Mr. Tim Drake, the current Robin, in Gotham City. Damian's off doing his thing, as we established in Robin. So Tim is filling in as Robin for the moment, pinch hitting, if you will, and acting as Batman's trusted partner. Tim is checking in on Bruce in particular. I mean, he's concerned that his friend, the couple that was murdered by the perp in the previous part of the story, might have affected Bruce in some kind of way, and Bruce is rather upset, but kind of remarks that even though Colin, who had been a playboy in his previous days but had finally settled down, had found happiness, he, Bruce Wayne, the Batman, cannot seem to afford that luxury. And Tim is concerned, and rightfully so. He sort of checks in because him and the rest of the family feel that after Bruce lost his fortune and wasn't being invited to a lot of the big events anymore, he sort of just gave up on being Bruce Wayne, which is an idea we've seen before and is something I'm going to mention later. But in particular, it seems that they want him to kind of go out more and be more of Bruce, and Batman sort of refutes that, yeah, that is kind of the case, that I have been more Batman lately, and because I haven't been invited to all these social gatherings, I haven't really had any reason to, and it's actually given me more opportunity to go out and fight the good fight as Batman. But he sort of puts Tim at ease and lets him know that he was invited to a recent gala, one that he knows is going to be a target for Penguin. Of course, it's not going to be all for fun and games, but he's going to make his way there tonight, and of course asks Tim to be his second in command while he's running this operation. So we cut over to the gala. Bruce Wayne is arm in arm with the eye candy of the week, classic Bruce Wayne. It's a hot blonde on his shoulder, and he's acting like the ridiculous airheaded playboy that we've seen him be in the past, and tells his lovely date to make his way over to the dance floor while he hits the men's room just to do his little rich boy thing. But in reality, he's making his way to the bathroom, not to rendezvous with Tim, but to pick up some supplies because he knows Penguin is going to hit the gala and soon. Tim heads straight for the boiler under directions of Bruce because he knows that in all likelihood, Penguin is going to go for something simple. He's a simple man. He's going to go for the simple option, which is gas, and that will be released through the boiler room. So Tim makes his way to the boiler room, disables all of Penguin's guards that are there, and automatically is setting up a neutralizing agent to make sure that when the gas is released, it won't affect the people in the gala too severely. Penguin arrives on the scene in a very dramatic fashion, proclaiming that the people in this gala do not deserve their wealth, and they will soon pay for their unfair advantage in life. But unfortunately, his gas does not release on time as he expects, and Batman, wearing a suit, or not really a suit, but like a collared shirt and pants with a belt and a bat cowl, shows up on the scene looking like a pirate. It's utterly ridiculous, but it doesn't really matter because he's able to make quick work of the rest of the goons while also disabling Cobblepot. Tim arrives on the scene and is able to make quick work of the rest of the goons while Batman turns his attention back to Cobblepot and is wondering just what the hell he's doing. Like, what is this whole crusade about? And that's when we discover that this Penguin, at least the one at the gala, is not actually Penguin, but is in fact Clayface working on behalf of Penguin. Why is Clayface working on behalf of Penguin? Well, we don't really have the answers for that just yet, but we know that he is exacting some kind of plan, a plan that had two potential routes. The first one being gas, the far more simple one, and the second one being far more destructive, as he had planned to blow the gala up to total rubble. But the people in the gala are trapped right now and are trying to make a quick exit. Robin is trying to set explosives at the door because they're locked right now and trying to make sure that everyone gets out. And Bruce rather coldly turns towards Clayface and lets him know that if the people are unable to make it out and Clayface does not help assist them, he had injected at some point in the past a formula in Clayface that, when detonated, would destroy presumably all of his molecules and any kind of trace of Clayface and pretty much completely eradicate him. Which, I mean, it's just straight up murder. So I guess Batman likes to kill now. Obviously, probably wouldn't use it, probably bluffing. But Clayface is not willing to take that chance. So as Tim is trying to assure the people that he's going to blow the doors and get them to safety, one of the Penguin goons pops off a shot and connects right through Tim's neck in a really gruesome panel. Again, this book is very, very visceral and very dark from Jorge, but pops off a shot that goes straight through Tim's neck and looks almost like a clean shot to one that I thought if it went straight through his neck there, he would surely die and bleed out. But thankfully, Bruce is able to suture the wound fast enough to get him to the Batmobile. And thankfully, the doors had exploded after Tim had been shot, so the rest of the people are able to evacuate while Clayface is providing cover. And Bruce is rushing to the hospital. Tim, who, for reasons I cannot understand, is somehow still able to speak, even though he should have a hole through his windpipe right now, tells Bruce that it's a little risky taking him to a hospital right now, especially given that he's dressed as Robin. And as soon as he gets to the hospital, they're going to know that it's Tim Drake. And if they figure out it's Tim Drake, they're going to know it's Batman, and so on and so on. And Bruce already has a plan for that, a rather grim plan as he flashes back to the last time that he had to do something like this, which was, of course, the death of Jason Todd. Tim isn't dead just yet. He's close to dying, but he's not quite dead. And is sort of running through a monologue in his head or some internal reflection in his head where he's thinking about how he had to do this the last time and how there may just never be a bottom to his mission and how such a grim thing can continue to happen to the people that he puts in his care. And even though he had thought about really just hanging up the cowl after the death of Jason Todd, which is a very justified thing to have and a very justified thing to do after the death of your partner, he continued going with the mission because he knew that there was no putting an end to that. So he undresses Tim as he had done with Jason, puts him in normal civilian clothes, and takes him to the emergency room where he will receive immediate care. But while they're in the hospital, Bruce decides to pay a little visit to someone who I had not expected to see in the hospital, someone who apparently has been a lot more sick than he'd been letting on, Oswald Cobblepot, the Penguin, the real Penguin, I should say, who informs Batman that he's dying of mercury poisoning. I guess it's all those fish, maybe. I mean, fish have mercury in them, I think. I don't know, but for some reason he's dying of mercury poisoning, and in his final days, he's decided that he is going to get his last revenge on the elite of Gotham, who never gave him the time of day, who always treated him like crap and treated him like an outsider because he was different and weird. Not necessarily because he was a self-made man. He made himself into quite a wealthy citizen of Gotham, but because he was always treated with disrespect and shunned because of his freakish appearance. And boy, they really play up that freakish appearance in this issue. He looks like the Danny DeVito Penguin from Batman Returns. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a dark moment and a dark encounter between Batman and Penguin. Penguin sort of is telling him that it doesn't really matter what he does. He already has the plan in place. And in fact, he has one more final plan for Batman, a plan that he seems to pop off right now as he slips a cyanide pill or some kind of death pill that puts him deep in shock to the point of death, where I believe that if he is not dead, he'll at the very least be in a coma. But I think this very well may be the death of Penguin, or as Batman calls it, Penguin's last stand, done in such a way that while Batman is trying to revive him as he's choking on whatever pill he took, it looks like Batman killed him, and he'll be able to frame him for murder and that sort of thing. And Batman, seeing that he's obviously being framed, makes his way out of the hospital and immediately flees the scene and makes his way back to one of the various micro caves, where I guess he just tries to go to sleep. We're not really given context for how soon after the next scene takes place, whether this could be a couple days or shortly after he flees from the hospital. But Bruce feels that there really is something deeper at play here, a mystery that he just doesn't have the full picture of quite yet. A mystery that he feels like he's lost under, and he doesn't really know what to do next, which after everything that's happened with Fear State, after everything that's happened with Batman Inc., after everything that's happened with Shadow War, it definitely feels appropriate for him to feel kind of adrift. Like, this is a mystery that's hitting me right in a vulnerable place at a very vulnerable time, and I don't know if I'm prepared for something like that. Before we head out of the Batcave, we check in one final time as the mysterious beeping is answered, and we find out that this is a strange mechanical robot, cyborg, some kind of thing, maybe not cyborg, but some kind of automaton called Failsafe that has now been activated. And I wonder if this is something that the Penguin had devised, or in my theory personally, is that it's something that Bruce had come up with, a failsafe to come online when, you know, shit had really hit the fan, or he had hit a low point. Because we'd seen him mention earlier that he had hit, or he ever wondered if there was a bottom to all this, and wondered if he could ever just hit an absolute low point and it could go no lower. And maybe in his darkest moments, kind of like with OMAC, as we've seen with previous things, designed a program that would act as a failsafe in case he fell. But yeah, wow, what a start. This was, yeah, part one of Failsafe. This was actually, I read this earlier this morning, and that was the third time I had read it. I probably shouldn't have done this, but I read it around 3 a.m. on Tuesday because I was really excited to check this one out. And I just couldn't wait until a normal hour, so I decided to stay up all the way until 3 a.m., which is, of course, midnight Pacific time when all the comics are released. And I bought my digital copy and I read it, and I have to say I was pretty whelmed upon that first read, but the second and third times, the book really presents something different. So for those who are reading this book, I would highly encourage you to go through it a couple times, because one of the immediate things that I noticed from this book is that it is not a it is not a one and done read, and I don't mean that as like a one and done story. I mean, this is not a book that you read and put away and don't read for a year. This is a first issue that you can read multiple times. It flows really, really well, which I was impressed by. And it definitely lends itself to multiple different readings because it feels like it's setting up a lot, and it is, but there are a lot of themes that are being introduced and reintroduced that are both tying into previous Batman continuity and trying to present some new stuff to craft a new, different era of Batman. And I really appreciate that. Some of those themes might be, very apparent from the jump. I mean, the obvious reference to death in the family from Starlin and Aparo, with the death of Jason Todd, that being a very pivotal moment. But there were also some elements from other stuff that I kind of caught here and there. The idea that Bruce is kind of prioritizing being Batman over being Bruce Wayne is something that's been explored in Bruce Wayne Murderer and Bruce Wayne Fugitive, but also was kind of toyed at a little with the beginning of Grant Morrison's time on Batman, where he'd been spending so much time as Batman, it was almost becoming obsessive, and he had to relearn how to be a Bruce Wayne character for the public. And in this case, we're kind of seeing a similar thing where after Fear State, Shadow War and everything, he's just been running really hot as Batman for a long time, and he hasn't been spending enough time as just Bruce Wayne, a member of Gotham, which I appreciate. And I hope they lean more into that, of like, yeah, I do have all this time, and I feel like I want to spend most of it as Batman, but I probably should be more Bruce Wayne. Like it's probably the thing that I should be doing. Like Tim is in the right, and the rest of the family are in the right, but I just don't feel that compulsion to be Bruce Wayne. I want to be Batman. I want to be more Batman. And like I said, we've seen that before, but I think it's an appropriate exploration given everything that's been happening and how much Batman has been present throughout his stories for the past year or so. Um, it is also a very dark book. And I had seen interviews where Zdarsky was talking about the kind of tone that he wanted to set with this book, and it was a lot darker, a lot more. I don't think gritty is the right word, nor do I think horror is the right word. I think dark is definitely appropriate, both visually but also tonally, because this is a book that is dealing with death, with pain, with loss, with feelings of regret, and certainly feelings of failure and hopelessness. I saw a review that called it nihilistic, which I don't know that I would entirely agree with, but I do think there is an almost hopeless quality that is underneath the surface and is kind of bobbing up here and there, where Bruce is asking if the mission is even worth it. Is there a bottom? Can I keep doing this? Like I feel like it's just too much. Which again, I feel like, and this is sort of the central point that I had, and I don't want to ramble too much, although I guess I can now because I'm the captain now. Um, but I do feel like this is a story and this is a theme that is really appropriate for the era. And you're going to hear me say that a lot, I think, probably with the next couple of issues. Like this feels like the right story for everything that has happened with Batman in the last year and a half or so. Like he's just been running really hard as Batman, and maybe it's time to kind of like, okay, get back to earth and reflect on like, well hell, I've been doing all this stuff and everything is still going on in Gotham, and it's not that the city feels worse. It's just how am I feeling? Like, am I doing better? Can I do better? Is that even possible for me? Is it even worth it to keep going, or is it just a hopeless, endless crusade? And so I feel like that is just the appropriate story to tell right now. Like, let's really just dig into that. And I'm hoping that those are the elements that are explored. Now, story wise, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, dealing with the Penguin, and it sets up a lot, but not a ton there, really. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts here. And it almost feels, it teeters on the edge of being cluttered because there are definitely a lot of things that Zdarsky is introducing and toying with that I feel like could be explored in a lot of different arcs, and it would be almost a disservice to just try and tackle everything in one arc. So I almost feel like this is the arc that you write when you only think you're going to write Batman once in your life. So you're like, okay, I'm going to stuff everything I possibly can into here. Let's go. But Zdarsky has made it sound like he's going to be here for the long haul, so really doesn't have to worry about that. So I hope that all of the things that are being teased will be explored a little bit later. Like, give it some time to air out. Like the thematic stuff of like hopelessness and Batman really kind of questioning the mission and all of that stuff. Please, let's get to that first, because I think all of that stuff is just remarkable. Um, Art wise, the book is amazing. It's about as great as you could expect from Jorge Jimenez, who has become an iconic Batman artist in a very short amount of time. I mean, I knew this dude was going to be great on Batman back in Justice League. I remember seeing his full body shots of Batman in the Sixth Dimension, which is one of the arcs that Snyder and Jimenez did on Justice League. And I mean, even from there, I could tell that like this dude, if he ever did Batman, he was going to be something special. And then he just blew it out of the park when he was working with Tynan. Even though the stories weren't great artistically, the guy was just going on firing on all cylinders, just going on all sides. I mean, just amazing, amazing stuff. And I can tell here, because Jorge, bastard that he is, has talked about tweaking his style a little bit because he knew that this story was going to be a little bit darker. And whereas all the stuff that was going on with Fear State and the Cowardly Lot was sort of a very different style of Gotham, very cyberpunk, very noir, neo-noir influenced there. He definitely had a new influence that he was bringing there, but this one was going to be more darker, um, darker, and definitely a lot bloodier and more visceral than previous stories. And it definitely shows, as I mentioned, in a few places where you really just get these very grim, very gruesome shots of people either dead or getting shot, as in the case with Tim, or something like that, where they're all that bloodiness and all that brutality is put on show. It's not hid in any way, and I really appreciate that. There are points where it becomes almost too muddy and too geometrical, where it almost loses me for a moment. So I can't say this is Jorge at his best, but he's absolutely doing some great stuff here, and I appreciate that he's at least trying to make the run look distinct from things that he had done before, because it could be very easy to just stick to the style that worked with Fear State and then just run with that. But that would get kind of boring, because it's like you've already seen it before, and as good as it is, you want to try something new, especially if it's going to be a new type of story. And I really appreciate that even if it doesn't work in every single panel, Jorge is committing himself to trying something new with his style. And again, just shows the versatility of this dude, and makes me hate him even more, because what the fuck, you can just change your style at any moment. Like, screw you, that you are so artistically talented that you can just completely try out a new art style and pretty much almost succeed every time. But that's just my jealousy talking. But yeah, this is a hell of a start. This is definitely a first issue that feels like a and I hope I'm not jumping the gun too much here, but this definitely feels like a first issue that is, trying to be a classic first issue. And when I say trying, I mean succeeding, really, because even if it was not a perfect first issue, I mean, those are hard. Those are always kind of difficult and tricky to land. A really stellar first issue. But this definitely feels like one of those classic, like, okay, we're starting something big here, and we're really trying to see how that plays out. And I got the feeling from that, like, right when we got to the dream that Bruce was having with the three Jokers. And I'm hoping that I'm not wrong there, but I get the feeling that this is a really like classic start here. Like, this is going to be a point where people turn to and say, you want to read a good Batman story, start here. I really hope I'm not wrong with the rest of the arc in that regard. But yeah, I mean, it's got a lot going for it, and I'm really hoping that it sticks the landing. It's a 6-part arc. God only knows what's coming after that 6-part arc. But I'm really hoping that this run delivers. So I would definitely encourage people to read this a couple of times, because the first one may not be that satisfying. And I remember thinking the same thing about his Daredevil run too, because you can flash back to 2019 when that started. Daredevil #1, when we were all 15 years younger. I read that issue probably 4 times, because the first time I read it, I was sort of meh on it. And even now, that first arc is a little awkward in the grand scheme of things, though I think it has definitely grown on me a lot more since 2019. But even then, I sort of knew, like, okay, this is an issue I'm going to have to read a couple of times just to kind of get a sense of both the handle and the characters, the tones and themes of the story, and everything that's being set up here, and everything that's trying to establish itself for what's to come. So again, I would highly encourage people, if you're feeling a little kind of, I don't want to say put off, but maybe let down by that first read, give it another read, maybe give it a third read, maybe give it a fourth read, and try and do something that or try and see if there's something else there that really works for you, because I do think that this is an issue that warrants multiple reads. But for the main story, I gave this an 8.5 out of 10, and I feel like it's setting up a lot of stuff, a lot of very interesting stuff to come down the line. We have a backup story also from Chip Zdarsky, with art from Belen Ortega, and colors from Luis Guerrero, with letters from Clayton Cowles yet again. Probably should have written that down. Sorry, Clayton. But this is a fairly short one. Just kind of tying up some stuff now that Penguin is dead, or at the very least not active at the Iceberg Lounge. And there's a couple of power players in Gotham that are trying to encroach upon the Iceberg Lounge, because in addition to being a real hot spot for gambling, it's also a place for gangsters to launder their money, and move certain drugs and other things, and it's just a really ideal spot. And so we are introduced to a few new players in Gotham. One, Finbar Sullivan, who is a client and also one of the gang leaders. We're also checking in on the Hasegawas, or the Yakuza, led by Aiko Hasegawa, who we already have met in Genevieve Valentine's Catwoman, and re-met in the current Catwoman run, who's now running all of the Yakuza trade in Gotham City. And Catwoman is sort of trying to act as the mediator between the various gangs that are flooding in and trying to take over Penguin's territory. And is really trying to act as like, the righteous voice here. Like, let's not erupt into yet another gang war. We've already done this multiple times. We don't need it again. But thankfully, before things get too bad, the the underbroker shows up, who we met during Tynan's run, and he shows up with a new friend called the Executor, who is the, as his name suggests, executor of wills, in particular wills of the costume criminals of Gotham. And he is here to announce that before they can do anything with Penguin's land, and if they even try and do anything, he'll be there to fight him because he's a giant metal behemoth. But he's here to execute Penguin's will, and when he does that, everything is fair play. But before that can happen, he needs to make sure that the right people are found, and the will is properly conveyed to them before anyone tries to make major moves on the Iceberg Lounge and the rest of Penguin's territory. Selina sort of wants no part in that and is dreaming of simpler times, of jewel thieves, or jewel robberies, and house burglaries and that sort of thing, and is kind of trying to move past that era of stuff, given everything that's happening with Aiko Hasegawa and Valmont and all the nonsense that's going on in Catwoman right now. But she has a rather unwelcome visitor has a rather unwelcome visit from the Executor, who is trying to enlist her services to act as a, not manhunter necessarily, but let's call it scout, to find the locations of the people that are mentioned in Penguin's will. And who are these people? Well, let's just say they're rather close to Penguin and leave it at that. Nah, I'm just kidding. They're his children, apparently, of which he has 10. That should make for an interesting one. I'm wondering if this is going to be like a 10 to 12 part backup saga, as Catwoman looks for the various children of Penguin. We've already met a couple, actually, or maybe just the one. I forget his name, but the son of Penguin, who's in Batgirl. So I'm sure he'll pop up, maybe or maybe not. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, decent backup, nothing outstanding. Great art from Belen Ortega. I think she's going to be a rising star in DC. I can just tell. Her style is kind of similar to Jorge Jimenez, kind of poetically enough, I should say. So it works very well as it flows from one story to the next. But the colors are definitely different, and mark the shift in stories. But yeah, I mean, Belen does a great job. There's no arguments there. Just, it's kind of another Catwoman story. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I'm sort of wondering whether or not this is just going to be a small story, or if it really is going to be like a 12-part saga. And if that is the case, I'm wondering why this couldn't just be in the main Catwoman book, because there is definitely a place for it. But yeah, I mean, with that being said, really, really satisfying read all around. I gave the backup story an 8 out of 10. Sort of reminds me of the Brubaker and Darwin Cook backups from Detective Comics, Trail of the Catwoman, right before they would go on to do their Catwoman series regular, back in 2002. And it was sort of like Slam Bradley's on the hunt for Catwoman because she's disappeared after whole other stuff in the run that I won't even get to because she was presumed dead. But sort of like a fun twist on that there, where instead of Slam Bradley being on the hunt for Selina, now Selina is on the hunt for someone else, or at least is trying to locate someone else, or someone's else, as I should say. So yeah, I don't know if that was a reference to that, but it just kind of reminded me of another backup with Catwoman, where they're trying to find people So yeah, I mean, I would give an 8 out of 10 for the backup, 8.5 out of 10 for the main story. But I really dug the main story so much that I'll just give them the whole issue like an 8.5. I'm not picky about it. And I do think that it's setting up some really interesting stuff to come for the rest of the series. Next up, we have Poison Ivy #2. I was very excited and very terrified to read this book. I hated the first one because it was so good and so amazing and blew me away with the quality of its story that I was just, I hated it because I was like, there's no way the second issue is going to be this good, and that sucks. That I know the joke is like the second issue slump, which is both in reference to sales as well as the quality of the story. But I really was hoping that it would not be the case with this one. So why don't we just find out if it holds up? But this is of course brought to us by the incredibly talented G. Well Wilson with art from Marcio Takara, colors from Arif Prianto, and the wonderful letters from Mr. Hassan Atsmain. El How, love you, buddy, over at Strip Panel Naked. So glad you're doing more stuff. Um, Ivy, who is still in Portland, I believe, or Seattle, if I remember correctly, is checking in at a diner, rather tired, rather strung out, and the nice worker, yeah, and the kindly restaurant owner checks up on her and gives her some food, tries to, revive her a little bit. And we're introduced to a presumable friend and maybe confidant of Ivy moving forward, a woman by the name of Jenny, who is a poet, starving artist. I'm sure we've all met one of those before, who apparently is also on the run. As the cops arrive shortly after they're all sitting down and enjoying each other's company. And Poison Ivy is having her usual reflections on what she's going to do, and she activates all the spores across the country that have been spreading to the rest of the people in the restaurant and things like that. But the police arrive and are there to arrest Jenny, who apparently decided that because poetry was not paying quite as much as she had hoped, she needed to get a side hustle. But thankfully, Ivy is able to use the Lamia to, let's say, influence the police officers rather suggestively so they can make their escape. And then once they're at the door, she's able to flip the Lamia around into being deadly and kill the cops while she returns to her van. But yeah, basically, Ivy, is kind of back on the road and makes her way to a hotel or motel, I should say, where she wants to lie low for the time being. And we get a couple flashbacks. One in particular that I want to mention between her and the gardener that I really liked, where she's just really livid and almost unchained, given that she's trying to do anything to go back to being Queen Ivy, not because of any kind of emotional or things like that, but really it was because she had the power of a god, and that is something that she wants to touch again. And that to me is just such a fascinating thing, um, because I can't imagine what it must have been like for Ivy to have been so omnipotent and so powerful at one point that she would have been able to crush Gotham City without barely lifting a finger, and now she's almost powerless. And to lose that so quickly and so fast after helping the city must really be devastating. But that scene between her and the gardener, just a really great scene of her kind of demonstrating her current mental state. But no, this issue was good. It did not hurt me as much as I thought it would. There was no second issue slump. I think it was not as good as the first, but I did really enjoy it, and I'm still super into this story right now. Again, I think the stuff that's really resonating with me is the personal stuff, like seeing Ivy's mental state, like how she is processing losing all that power what she's willing to do to try and exact some kind of justice for losing that power. And again, I'm just really hoping we get more of that throughout the rest of the series. The art from Marcio Takara is amazing. Probably the best I've ever seen of his stuff. I was never a huge fan of him, but I think he's really outdoing himself here, and that definitely works well with the colors, and really kind of creates this almost like hazy. I don't want to say dusty, but yeah, very plant, very green, if you will, series where it feels like everything almost has like a green, uh, earthen tint to it, if you will, and I really like that. It definitely fits with Poison Ivy's character and everything else. So this one got an 8.5 out of 10 for me. Not the 9 that I gave the first issue, but still really good and still very satisfying. Oh, right. And our last issue for this week is certainly no slouch, but, well, we'll see if it's possibly slouching in story. That is Dark Crisis #2, the big summer event that everyone, and by everyone I mean about 15 people, is excited to read. This is, of course, brought to us by Mr. Joshua Williamson, Daniel Sampier on art, Alejandro Sanchez on colors, and letters from Tom Napolitano. This issue can be summed very briefly because it is not a lot of content, and I was actually shocked how quickly this read, and I don't necessarily mean that in a good way. We check in very briefly with Pariah, who is still spouting his same nonsense of how he's going to work with the Great Darkness to bring a new crisis, to create a new multiverse, and to bring Earth Zero to its knees. We cut to Titan's Tower, where miraculously Nightwing has survived, where oh my God, that should be a major revelation that all of the Titans are still alive. But if you had looked at the previews for the next issue, you would know that they were going to survive, and there really wasn't any kind of concern in that regard. But Deathstroke is holding the rest of the Titans captive alongside the secret society, and Deathstroke in particular wants to challenge Nightwing, not necessarily just to kill him, but really to prove a point, as he states, because he feels that a message should be sent to all the people who have decided to step up, all the legacy heroes who have tried to step up in the absence of the old guard, the Justice League, who are now dead. Do you get it? You see? Oh God, yeah. The themes here are not subtle at all. They're very apparent. Yeah, no, it's really just it's that fight between Deathstroke and Nightwing. They're trading blows, they're trading words. Dick seemingly gets the upper hand for a moment and is ready to challenge Deathstroke to one final battle, but thankfully to the timely intervention of one John Kent, who arrives to make sure that Dick is not taken out of action too quickly. They're able to work together to prevent things from getting worse. But of course, that can only last for so long, as who should arrive but Cyborg Superman, which admittedly was a fun throwback to that issue of Deathstroke Inc., where they had recruited Cyborg Superman to work for the Society. So now we see that he's still under the employ of the Society and is willing to work alongside this new crazed version of Deathstroke. He's just hell-bent on proving that all the legacy should die and that no one should step up and they should just embrace the darkness, and it's the darkness versus the light, and you get it, you get the idea. But anyway, before they can mop the floor with the Titans, Cyborg, Superman, and Deathstroke and the rest of the Society, the Great Darkness, through Pariah, calls out to Deathstroke and lets him know that he doesn't want the Titans dead just yet. He's got plans for them. They factor into something, so they need to make their way out and try not to ruin things too much before they make their exit. Deathstroke is admittedly a little upset at this, but decides that it's for the best and it's going to do what the darkness says. The rest of the Society are kind of confused, in particular Warp, who is like, why did we come here then? What was the point? But he doesn't give a shit because he's Deathstroke, so he's like, let's just hightail it out of here, boys. And we'll be back, rest assured. John is unable to get the upper hand on Cyborg Superman, but thanks to some help from Cyborg, he is able to shut that down before things get worse. And who should show up after all the carnage and all the mayhem but Black Adam, who is really just being a dick here, even more so than usual, saying, this is clearly why you're not ready to lead a Justice League. John kind of calls him out, saying, well, if you're so equipped and you know so much, why aren't you leading a Justice League? And Black Adam says the smart thing, says, that's exactly what I'm going to do, boy. Sit down. I'm going to put together my team and lead them to justice. We cut to a strange alien ship with little to no context where we check in with, and I couldn't believe this, a Kyle Rayner who is alive and is not dead and is not floating through space aimlessly and is not on some strange alien planet, though based on his outfit was probably prisoner on some planet or another, and this is him escaping. So good for you, Kyle. You were able to make it out. But before he is able to complete his daring escape, who should show up but Hal Jordan and Joe Mullane to save the day, only they're too late because Kyle can take care of himself, which I'm shocked. I'm surprised he can even, get out of the bed in the morning. But Hal and Kyle are very happy to see each other, and Hal fills him in on everything that's been happening with the Corps and how they're dead and how the Flashes are all on a quest to find Barry Allen before, the Great Darkness shows up and all this craziness that Black Adam conveyed to Hal. And Kyle rather smartly says, well, there's only about 3 of us, and I don't have a ring, so we really can't do all that much. And Hal, being Hal, says, oh yeah, I wouldn't come without some kind of backup. And he's there with the rest of the Green Lantern Corps, all restored to how they previously were, and basically tells Kyle, it's time to suit up. We're getting back to work. Okay, where to start? I guess let's start with the ending, because this basically just confirms that the whole Jeffrey Thorne Green Lantern run was utterly pointless and meant nothing. And aside from giving John the Godstorm, it really left no lasting impact on the Green Lantern mythos, because I'm looking at the splash page here of all these various Green Lanterns, and most of the ones that were thought to have died in the Invictus storyline are all back here. Arisi is here, Simon's here, with his arm fixed, by the way, and everything else, like, just okay. Guy is here, Jessica, like all the people, everyone is back to how they were. Even lanterns that we hadn't seen in a while, like Medville and other ones are here, and really just kind of confirms that them trying to slaughter the Corps was utterly pointless and was reversed and had no relevance. So glad I really didn't care about that run, because it offered nothing of substance at all. But that's just me ranting about a book I didn't particularly like. The rest of the book is okay, but I think I discovered something while reading this book that I wrote down about our dear friend, Mr. Josh Williamson. And what I discovered is that Josh Williamson is very good at writing fun, lighthearted, action-packed, and often emotional and personality-centric stories, let's call it that, like Birthright, Deathbed, Robin. Like, all these books are very fun, very enjoyable. They don't take themselves too seriously, but they have their emotional moments when they need to. But really, they're just, they're kind of like Josh expressing that inner part of himself that just wants to have fun and enjoy the stories. What I realized is these are the kinds of stories that he excels at. What he does not excel at is the big, metaphorical, cosmic, intertwined stories like Dark Crisis is going to be. And I can see that. It shows so much in this issue, because the best moments are the ones between characters where it feels like he's having fun getting these interactions and stuff like that, or really emotional moments between, like, Deathstroke and Nightwing. And all that stuff is pretty good, but as it ties to the larger story of the Great Darkness, it almost makes it feel like, the Great Darkness story anyway, it almost makes it feel like it's not important. It makes it feel like it's on the back burner, like it's the least important part of the story. The most important part of the story is the character stuff. And that's all well and good, but for a book called Dark Crisis that has been hyping up this mysterious, malevolent force so much, I kind of expected to see more of the story tying into that, and we're really just not getting it. The majority of this issue was devoted to Nightwing Deathstroke conflict. We only got a couple of mentions of the Great Darkness here and there, and I mean, it feels like he wants to prioritize one thing because that's what he likes to do, but he wants to also have the great, cosmic epic battle that you would expect from a big event. And I think he kind of has to realize that you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like you almost have to either decide between the two and play to the stuff that you like, or you know, just don't have any of that stuff in there, which you can't really do now because the story is built around the Great Darkness, so you can't really just take it out. But yeah, I was reading this issue and I realized that and I was like, yeah, I get it now. Like that doesn't make him a bad writer. The fact that he has his strengths in certain areas, I just feel that he's so ill-equipped to tackle a story like this, which is a shame because I really like, some of the ideas in here. They're not new ideas by any means. It's funny that this book is being called the sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths because more often than not, that's usually the label that's applied to another sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths from 15 years ago called Infinite Crisis, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. And that one tackles similar points, although that one is really more focused on the darkness of the post-crisis era and that sort of thing. But I feel like a writer who had a better sense of the cosmic, metaphorical stories, like a John Hickman or a Jim Starlin, or someone like that, someone who can handle this type of material, would have a much better time telling the story, and would probably do a much better job handling that bigger stuff than Josh Williamson would. Because the character moments, all those go over pretty great. It's just, I mean, every time they're trying to connect it to the bigger, Great Darkness stuff, it doesn't even really feel important. It's almost like a footnote, like, oh yeah, I guess that's still happening. Anyway, Deathstroke versus Nightwing, that's awesome, right? So yeah, it's just very strange, and I'm wondering if maybe after this is all over, when Josh kind of steps away from most of his DC projects and goes off and does Dark Ride, he'll kind of get back to that type of storytelling where it's very small, it's a lot more personal, but lighthearted and fun. Like let's not try and do these big, crazy, epic bonanza, cosmic, multiversal stories. Like let's just get back to basics. Let's go back to what we did with Birthright. Let's go back to what we did with Robin, and just try and work with that as best as we can. So this one got another 8 out of 10 for me. The previous issue also got an 8 out of 10. It is not bad by any means, and I have to say the art by Daniel Sampere is carrying this book. My God, there are some gorgeous panels, and it's really, I mean, I don't want to say it's the only reason you should be reading this book, but it's certainly the best reason to read this book. I'm telling you, it's not the story. The art is just incredible. But yeah, it's not a bad book by any means. It feels like it wants to do one thing, even though it's established itself as another thing, and that just makes it feel very awkward at points. And I wonder just how the hell this story is going to end when it clearly just wants to have these moments, but also has to tie into the Great Darkness and multiverse stuff and all that crap. So we'll see how it ends, but I don't know. I hope it doesn't disappoint, but considering his track record, doesn't look great. But that is all the books for this week. So before we wrap it up, I guess I will go into my top 3 books of this week. It feels a little weird not doing it with Josh and Rob. I miss you guys. But feel free to send me your top 3 when you guys get a chance to read the books, and then we can have a proper debrief. But as for me, my top 3 books were I had Flashpoint Beyond number 3 in third place. I had Poison Ivy number 2 in second place, and then my first place pick. Just I think a really fascinating, a really well constructed first issue. I don't want to say exceptional, but I think really well constructed and really really satisfying first issue in Batman 125. Just the start of something new, a new era, the Zdarsky era, the Canuck era, which I'm definitely excited to see how that all plays out. I guess if I had to choose a favorite moment, I mean, there were plenty of favorite moments throughout Batman, certainly in Flashpoint Beyond. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I would be lying if I said there weren't some pretty cool moments in that fight between Deathstroke and Nightwing in Dark Crisis, even if it really just isn't working all that well as a story. But if I had to, just based on art alone and how badass of a scene that is, that whole double page spread of Nightwing versus Deathstroke, where he has his his Eskrima sticks and Deathstroke has his staff, all just incredibly well illustrated and really fluid, and it was just totally awesome. Like just from completely divorced from the book, it was just really cool. I almost want to give a second favorite moment, which I guess I can, just to pad out the time, in Batman 125, where Batman is talking to Penguin. Penguin is sort of commiserating about how the Gotham elite had mistreated him and never, treated him as he should have been treated. And Batman very bluntly just says, "Life isn't fair, Cobblepot." As Oswald makes a face that I'm sure many have made when someone tells you life is not fair. So yeah, no, good stuff there. Definitely a lot of moments that I really enjoyed this week. But those were two that came to mind in particular. Well, I really did enjoy that, folks. But I'm afraid I have to leave now because my toilet is overflowing, and I don't have a plunger. So I am going to have to call the plumber and figure this out because it is overflowing and it is such a mess. And honestly, this is probably the worst thing that I've ever smelled. It is definitely, Josh, insert the biggest thinker audio clip here. Cool. As for my biggest stinker this week, it was kind of tough because I don't know that I had one that I actively disliked. If I had to give uh, biggest stinker to at least one book, probably be Nubia, Queen of the Amazons. Not because it was a terrible book, but just because it was very weak. Just I feel like I'm waiting for something, anything kind of major to happen post Trial of the Amazons, and I don't feel like I'm getting it from this book. So I'm really hoping that it can find some kind of way to just step it up and soon, before I just completely lose all interest in this book, which is a shame because I think Nubia is a great character and definitely deserves a great series. But I guess we shall see. Well, I don't have any titles to nominate for the dump list, and we are a democracy, so I can't just nominate them all on my own. So I guess we will hash that out once we all are on the network in the future. But yeah, this has been odd. Recording by myself, I don't like it very much, if I'm being honest. I feel like I've talked too much, and I just feel very uncomfortable. So next week it will not be that, I promise, and you will not just have to hear my annoying voice for an hour and change. But yeah, that's our show. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be here next week talking comics, and we hope you'll stop by. You remember, you can always go to notarobotpodcasts.com for all of our episodes and our other shows with all sorts of people. We are, of course, still on Substack. We're putting out great content. I have been a little lax with the Indie Corner, but it will be coming back soon. Just life kind of got in the way, and I just wasn't as on top of it as I should have been. But I've been reading plenty of great indie books, and I really want to get that started back up again. So I will get there. But with that, there's only one way that we say goodbye around here. I guess I say goodbye around here today. Until next time, be good to each other and don't be a robot.